Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Woxki MMA channel. Today, we're going to be building a card for UFC 331 in LA at the Crypto.com arena. There's been a couple matchups rumored for this card, but there's only one of them on Topology. For an event that's in 2 months' time, there isn't a lot of info out about this event, so I'm going to be speculating. I'm going to be matchmaking some fights that I think would be welcome additions to this card. We're just doing the prelims and the main card. We're not doing the early prelims. Hope you can understand. But yeah, let's get straight into it. We've got Punahele Soriano versus Charles Radke. This is a pretty sick fight. Soriano's in a bit of a renaissance phase of his career. He was 3-4 at one point in the UFC. He's since turned that into 7-4. 7-4, yeah, with a 4-fight winning streak. Notable win in there over Urosh Medic. Meanwhile, we've got Charles Radke, Buffalo Chuck, I think the nickname is. He's only lost to Mike Malott and Carlos Prates. He is now on a 2-fight winning streak. I believe his last fight was a submission. Yeah, and he trains with Bilal Muhammad. I reckon this is a good one. Book this fight. Probably ends up as a finish, but you know, some unranked welterweight matchmaking. We move on to Brian Ortega versus Jared Gordon at lightweight. Ortega's last fight was basically a lightweight fight against Aljamain Sterling. Obviously, the result affected the featherweight rankings, but Ortega just can't do 145 anymore. They tried to book him against Renato Moicano. Since then, I feel like Moicano's kind of... I think the Moicano matchup is now a bit too high of a value. He's number 7 in the new rankings, and Ortega is on a 2-fight losing streak. So I think a suitable opponent for him would be Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon's got a fair bit of name value in the lightweight division. He's lost his last 2 fights. One of them, he got hit by a car the day of the weigh-ins, and he still fought with a sprained MCL. So, he's a tough guy. Will Brian Ortega be able to bring the lighter man skill? I don't know, but I feel like you at least kind of owe him a shot at lightweight. It'd be a bit disingenuous. I don't know about disingenuous, but it'd be a bit, tough to give him a Lance Gibson Jr. or something like that. I think a Jared Gordon matchup, it's kind of like Unk v Unk. But Ortega's kind of got a chance in the fight, and that's where I stand on that one. But I like this matchup. Maybe Gordon might be a bit much for Ortega. Like, Ortega is not the biggest guy. But, we've seen cutting less weight revitalize other guys' careers. So we'll see if this works for Ortega or if this is his last fight. Anyway, Roman Kopylov versus Yusri Belgarui. 2 kickboxers. How does Belgarui make middleweight? He's like 6'5". He says he's been looking for matchups. I think it was like 7 matchups. 7 people declined. 4 of them or 3 of them were ranked. The UFC wants to get this guy a ranked opponent, but no one up there is biting. So I think a Roman Kopylov fight could kind of be a good way to show his level amongst other high-level strikers in the UFC. Obviously, Kopylov, he beat Marco Tulio in his last fight, but it kind of wasn't the greatest performance in the world. He then lost to Paulo Costa a little bit ago. So we've kind of seen him as one of these like B grade strikers in the UFC. But Belgarui, he looked really good in his last fight against a undefeated prospect. I think it was Mansur Abdul Malik. He absolutely beat him up over 3 rounds and got the knockout late in the fight. Was it over 3 rounds? Did it go that far? I don't know. But it was a crazy fight. And, you know, I think this is a fight that doesn't really hit the ground. I know Kopylov took Cesar Almeida down in that fight because he didn't really want to strike with him. I just don't think he's going to be able to get Belgarui to the ground. We saw how well Belgarui defended the takedowns against Abdul Malik. We saw, you know, he trains out of Alex Pereira's camp. These guys drilling the same things. These guys, you know, he's training with Glover Teixeira. He's training with all these good guys. He's got all that experience, and I'd like to see how that stacks up against an established opponent such as Roman Kopylov. Moving on, this is the fight that I believe maybe not officially announced for the card, but like, you know, the reliable sources are reporting it. Charles Jourdain versus Marlon Vera. Jourdain's kind of doing the Daniel Larson pose in this photo, but I think this is a matchup that favors him pretty heavily. We see Marlon Vera nowadays. After that Sean O'Malley loss, it's just been pretty consistent downhill thing for him. We've kind of seen him be a bit lethargic on the feet, you know, not really moving, not really putting in everything he has to give. We saw the decision get away from him against David Martinez, against Ayman Zahabi. He got his previously uncrackable chin cracked by Davison Figueiredo, and we've seen Davison Figueiredo also decline. So overall, just bad looks for Marlon Vera. This would be like the 5th fight in his losing streak, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, I don't think it's going to continue in a good way. Jourdain, he had a somewhat close performance against Kyler Phillips, but I thought he won. I also don't think Kyler Phillips is someone I rate very highly, so there's that. But I just think at bantamweight, Jourdain's going to have the higher volume. He's going to get more oohs and ahs from the crowd with his dynamic shots. That's going to, you know, sway the judging, what have you, sway the perception of the fight. I think he's got this one in the bag. But it's kind of, when you think about it, I don't know if you guys have seen Marlon Vera's, like, his Instagram account where he does all the photo dumps and he's trying to be really aesthetic and stuff. This is like that kind of type of Instagram account versus, you know, the stuff Charles Jourdain posts. This guy posts some absolutely wild things on Instagram Reels. So, you know, this is kind of the photo dump versus the shit post kind of thing. I don't know. I don't like saying shit post. It's like a bit of a band kid word, but you know what I'm getting at. You know where I'm coming from. Next up, Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green. I talked about this fight in my last video. Hooker called out Green to fight in LA. Green's down as a clown. Unk scrap. You know, after a bit of deliberation, I reckon Hooker probably wins this one. I think if it becomes a back and forth kind of war and Bobby Green's taking a lot of shots, he doesn't usually receive them well, right? So I think Hooker would probably get like a damage-based decision or a late TKO in this fight. But I've said my thoughts about it before, so I'm not going to go on too long. Next fight, Yusuf Zalal versus Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico does a lot of training in LA with that conditioning guy who makes the fighters do like these ridiculous conditioning circuits where it's like, oh, I'm flipping a tire. This is going to really help me. Obviously, I'm not a sports scientist, but seems a bit snake oily to me. We've got him against Yusuf Zalal, who lost pretty recently, but he didn't get a lot of damage in that performance against him. And I think he should be looking to come back against somebody like Aaron Pico, who the UFC is clearly, they're trying to promote this guy. They want him to be the next biggest thing. They give him, a high-ranked contender in his debut. He loses. He gets another ranked guy. And then he looks a little bit better. I think Zalal should really be trying to capitalize right now. His stock is at maybe not an all-time low. I mean, he got cut from the UFC before, right? But his stock isn't the highest right now. Everyone knows Aljamain Sterling is a high-level opponent. But regardless, Yusuf Zalal should be looking to bounce back against Aaron Pico. What is my cursor doing? Has this been here the whole time? Where is this? If I put it down here, will it go away? And will the bar go away? Man, fuck this. I made this fight in another video, which I don't think a lot of people watched. And I also made the point, both these guys are Moroccans, so you're definitely getting the Morocco market watching this video. But I think the grappling is kind of interesting with this fight. I mean, Pico, D1 wrestler, Zalal, very crafty with his jiu-jitsu and his submissions. We saw what he did to Josh Emmett. I think Zalal should be looking to grapple in this fight, but I don't know. It's tough. Pico, high-level opponent, doesn't have the best chin, but Zalal doesn't have the most pop. I saw rumors going around that Pico would maybe fight Arnold Allen on this card. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would have been a good fight as well. But I just think this is the one that should be made. Moving on, and obviously, like I said, Pico fights out of LA, hangs with the Jackson podcast guys, hangs with Arman Tsarukyan, who is definitely not on this card later. Wink, wink. But yeah, continuing on to our... Alright, so I should have specified. I don't know if I specified. This is the prelim headliner. This is the main card opener. This is the fourth fight on the card. Featured fight. Roundtree versus Reyes. Khalil Roundtree recently pulled out of his fight with Magomed Ankalaev due to an undisclosed injury. We don't know how severe it was, right? But if it wasn't that severe, then I would say he should be looking to fight again in LA with the Jackson podcast guys against Dominic Reyes, who is also from I don't think Roundtree's from California, but Reyes is, right? So two heavyweight or light heavyweight dudes who are associated with the area. It makes sense from a matchmaking perspective. Roundtree shouldn't have been fighting Ankalaev. He shouldn't have been fighting the number one ranked guy. He's only lost to top 5 guys. What he should be doing is fighting a guy off a little bit of momentum in Dominic Reyes. And I can see this fight getting scrappy. We haven't really seen Dominic Reyes fight a lot of guys built like Khalil in the UFC. Khalil Roundtree is one of these shorter light heavyweights. But he's got a lot of thud in his shots. He's got that explosive Muay Thai style, dangerous, lethal oblique kicks to the knees. Meanwhile, Reyes, he's one of these kind of bread and butter guys. He squeaked out a decision against, Johnny Walker. But I think this fight is also pretty interesting from the perspective that Roundtree, he's been taking a lot of damage and he doesn't take it well. Likewise, Reyes, not known for his durability, has been knocked out on previous occasions, multiple times. So it's kind of one of those, will they, won't they? Which is what happened in Reyes' last fight, right? Everyone thought that him versus Johnny Walker would be a finish, but both guys were kind of, scared to engage because they knew that they didn't have the best chins. If they got hit clean, the fight would be over. I don't think Roundtree is going to really be worried about that. I think he's still going to be bringing it, which is why I think this is a better fight than the Johnny Walker one. This would be a more hyped fight if Roundtree was coming off a win, or Reyes was coming off multiple wins. You might say, last time, well, where am I going with this? Last time Reyes or Roundtree was in the featured position on a pay-per-view, it was against Yuri Prohaska, and we all saw how that fight went. I think he's one of those guys that you want high up on a numbered event to really showcase what the higher weight classes are about, and I think Reyes would be the appropriate dance partner, if you will. Moving on. Tsarukyan versus Oliveira 2 for the BMF title is one of two things you could do with Arman Tsarukyan. Spoiler alert, this is the co-main event, right? 5 rounds either way. If Tsarukyan were to rematch Oliveira, it would make sense in relation to Gaethje's turnaround, right? He says he wants to fight next year. Okay, we need a clear number 1 contender. What better way to do it than Tsarukyan versus Oliveira 2? For the BMF title, I think so. I think the UFC could market that. Tsarukyan's obviously been doing all these side quests and stuff. Whereas Oliveira, he's been really active. But if one of them were to get a title shot right now, I think it should be Oliveira. Mainly because Tsarukyan's body of work at lightweight hasn't aged particularly well. And I say that because his last 3 wins, Dan Hooker, good win, not the best opponent. And I like Dan Hooker, but Tsarukyan was always going to win that fight. He squeaked out a decision against Charles Oliveira. Close, controversial. I thought Tsarukyan won, but in the long scheme of things, it's not the most impactful thing. Had he finished him or had some kind of, shutout performance, yeah, okay. I think we could say Tsarukyan deserves the shot over Oliveira, but it just goes down from there. His third most recent win is Beneil Dariush. He got sloppy seconds basically after Oliveira knocked him out. Then Joaquim Silva. He didn't look good in that fight. He got dropped in that fight. Damir Ismagulov. I didn't watch that fight. Mateus Gamrot. He hasn't really done a lot of work through the rankings of the lightweight division, is what I'm getting at. And I think Oliveira deserves the shot over him. So let's say that this fight doesn't happen, that Oliveira does get the shot over Arman Tsarukyan, and that Arman Tsarukyan needs to fight again. Well, somebody has been saying that they plan to move to 155 pounds. And that somebody has also alluded to fighting Arman Tsarukyan. This could be a good fight. This could be a nice 5-round co-main event for UFC 331. Tsarukyan versus Lopez. How do I think Lopez fares at 155? I don't know. He's a big 145er, obviously. He was the backup fighter for Gaethje versus Topuria. But we haven't seen him against, a proper 155er. We saw him against Volk, who could go to 155, but that doesn't really count. Last time he was against a wrestler who kind of controlled him to a decision. Obviously, again, Volk had success with the wrestling in their first fight. But when we really want to wind back the clock, we're talking about Movsar Evloev. Short notice fight. Good look for Lopez. But also kind of telling that, yes, he is dangerous on the ground. And maybe Tsarukyan will be scared of going to the ground because he'll be cautious of the high-level jiu-jitsu that Lopez possesses. Or that could also mean that Arman Tsarukyan just wants to take him down and get him out of there. Will he be able to do that? I don't know. We haven't really seen a lot of Lopez's defensive wrestling. We've seen his offensive wrestling. We saw that against John Silver. He beat him up for a round. But sometimes, someone being the hammer is very different to them being the nail. We've seen Lopez be the nail. He doesn't get deterred when he is losing a fight per se. But the fight does kind of get away from him. And in that way, I would favor Tsarukyan in this fight. But, it's a toss-up. There's a lot of unknown variables that Lopez would bring into this fight. I think maybe physicality could be a problem. Because we saw with Holloway versus Oliveira, a former featherweight moving up to lightweight, there's a lot more they're a lot heavier. They're able to smudge them a fair bit. Lopez and Holloway have similar frames, whereas, Arman Tsarukyan, stocky guy, good wrestler, a proven wrestler, has been able to hold a lot of people down. We even saw his fabled match against the MMA guru. This guy means business, okay? He also, does a lot out of LA. A thing with Arman Tsarukyan fighting in these California cards, he was scheduled to fight Islam at, the Intuit Dome. And, I was looking for Armenian guys, is what I'm trying to say, that would fight on this card with Tsarukyan. But they're not doing too well in the UFC. Melsik Bagdasarian just got submitted in the first round. Armen Petrosian is now 8-7 since leaving the UFC. But Tsarukyan should be fighting here. He also trains with that conditioning guy that Pico trains with. Makes all the sense in the world. Jackson affiliated. Again, good fight. Book it. Last off, we have Van vs. Pantoja 2. I think this can main event with a strong co-main, with an Arman Tsarukyan co-main event for 5 rounds. BMF title or not, I think a flyweight main event here could be good. We've seen Van. We saw him fluke an injury over Pantoja. Maybe not a fluke. Maybe Pantoja shouldn't have posted his arm out. There's no maybe about that. He should not have posted his arm out. Regardless, we've seen we've seen him fight Tatsuro Taira. And the mindset kind of going into that fight for a lot of people was, well, if Van can hold his own against someone who's bigger than him, who should be able to impose the grappling, who should be able to, smudge him, and has that submission threat, has that finishing instinct that is shared with Pantoja. We saw Van hold his own in that fight. Granted, Tatsuro Taira's striking is not the same caliber of Pantoja. He doesn't have that kind of scrappy, he doesn't have that dog in him like Pantoja does. But I think the odds are stacked against Pantoja in this fight. The arm dislocation, whatever. Initially, people were like, "Oh, it's not that bad. It's just, it popped out. Things happen." But he has since taken on a bit of a extensive rehab for that injury, whatever. He's taken time out. His activity used to be his strength, but now he's been on the sidelines, and I don't think he's going to come back the same. I like Pantoja. I like some of his fights. The Kai Kara France one was kind of not fun to watch, but I'm not saying that as a Kai Kara France fan. I'm just it was a bit shit. But that's okay. It looked like these two guys were about to go at it the first time they fought, and that was a really nice 30-second fight. but we want to see a really nice 25-minute fight, or maybe 15, depending on if it gets stopped. Does it get stopped? Who knows, right? And we just need this fight to happen for the flyweight division to move on. We've got Manel Kape waiting in the wings. We've got all these top contenders. But, this is a fight that I think could main event with the appropriate undercard, with the appropriate main card, with the promised amount of big names and whatever. I think this could really main event. I think, the bantamweight title fight's going to take a while to happen. Don't know what's happening with the women title fights. And, the featherweight title fight, I think, could headline a card in Australia or something, or maybe, the Middle East or whatever, because of Mobsar. So we'll see how the rest of that all folds out, but that's what I had in mind for UFC 331. I'm going to try and do some picks for UFC OKC soon, but yeah, good to talk, and yeah, see ya, bye.